Hey friends, did you hear? The doors to my new program, the Catalyst Academy, are open. The Catalyst Academy is a 12-month incubator for women of color who want to grow their thought leadership through public speaking. The time is now for you to take the stage, sis. Applications to be a founding member close on January 15th, which means you still have a few days to get it in. You can learn more and apply at bit.ly/The Catalyst Academy. Now, let's get into the episode. Welcome to Oversharing with Rhonda, a podcast to amplify the voices of trailblazing women. My name is Rhonda Khan, and I believe in the power of authenticity, vulnerability, and storytelling to connect the masses. As a public speaking coach, speech therapist, performer, mom, and chronic oversharer, I'm often empowering others to own their stories. And what I found is that the most transformative change happens when we share our journeys while being unapologetically ourselves. Hey everybody! A quick note, this episode was recorded before the horrific events at the Capitol on January 6th. While we are still dealing with the fallout of it and possibly managing emotions, feelings, I want to hold space for how you're processing this. Today's episode happens to be about grounding yourself and getting your mindset ready in this new year. And I am hoping that it serves as a space for self-care, a level of grounding, and reset as you continue through 2021. Let's get it going. Happy 2021, everyone. We made it. Whether you are feeling optimistic about the new year or grateful you simply survived 2020, today's episode will be a good one for you. Do you set goals and intentions every year? I do. I'm one of those people. I know that we can plan and make changes anytime during the calendar year. But since I believe 2018, I've been doing these yearly review sheets from Ink and Vault. Have you heard of them? Do you do them? By the way, Ink and Vault, tell me if you want a sponsorship, because I like these sheets because they help me reflect and appreciate things from my previous year. I just got done reading the book, The Big Leap. Y'all read it? It's a game changer for anyone who wants any level of success and happiness in their lives. And I actually may do a podcast about that whole book because it is mind-blowing the way we can set limits for ourselves that we don't need to. But in either case, between my journaling, reading The Big Leap, and doing my yearly sheets, a word that kept coming up for me is ease. One thing that this current guest shares about making goals is that we often set goals for ourselves without identifying how we want to feel. And for myself, I used to always be concerned about the outcome of whatever I wanted to accomplish. So do these things, this, check the boxes, right? And I never thought about how I want to feel when I'm doing it. One thing that I say I have learned in 2020 is that you can accomplish things and still feel stressed and awful and overwhelmed and disconnected. This year, I'm going to switch it up. And I wrote with every goal with ease. And I'm including ease as a major goal, something I want to do in every aspect of my life. In addition to that, I am focusing on doing the inner work, prioritizing that over everything else. This is why my conversation with my guest today, Shirin Eskandani, couldn't have come at a better time. Shirin is a coach, a speaker, a fellow entrepreneur, and a new friend that I met for coffee a couple weeks before the pandemic hit and everything shut down. When I met her, we met to talk about business stuff, possible, that business friend meetup, like, hey, I like you. I like your work. Let's see how we can collaborate and support each other. And I loved her energy. And I was like, girl, we're going to be friends. And we talked like we'd known each other for years. But the moment I knew for sure that I wanted her to be my friend was when we were talking business for a bit. And at some point in the conversation, she was like, okay, girl, can we stop talking business stuff and just talk about life? And I was like, yes. I need so much of that. And it was so freeing for her to say that. Now, I am myself everywhere I go. I talk about everything. Oversharing with Rhonda is a real thing. But I do know that sometimes I can get caught up talking about work and business because it consumes so much of me. And I don't get to have the deep connection, especially in person at the time, that I want or need and be able to really build community. So saying that to say, get folks in your circle, your squad, your community that will be interested in all parts of your life, whether or not they resonate with them or not. Get you folks like that. Now, this conversation is a fix my life, snatch me up, get me all the way together type conversation about inner work that you need. So I want you to get your notebook out if you don't have it already. We talk boundaries. We talk worth. We talk intuition. We talk perfectionism. There are so many quotes and affirmations in this one conversation that will get you together and get you through. So let's get into it. Shirin Eskandani is a life coach, public speaker, and writer who specializes in mindfulness and mindset work. She has been featured as a wellness expert on The Today Show, Shape, and Cosmopolitan Magazine. Prior to her building her successful coaching business, she was an award-winning opera singer performing at Carnegie Hall and the Metropolitan Opera. Shirin's holistic approach to transformation is influenced by her background in meditation, spirituality, and the arts. She's the co-founder of The Glow Up and the Brown Girl Brunch and hosts 2 podcasts, Wholehearted Coaching the Podcast and Two Girls Talking Shit. Shirin Eskandani, welcome to Oversharing with Rhonda.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So I have so many things I want to talk to you about, but one of the things I'm most fascinated with is the fact that you are a trained opera singer.
Yes.
Yes, girl. I mean, like high level, like you have performed at the Met, okay? Not just I am classically trained, but you have lived the life. And I went to your website and I'm going to read a segment from your bio, which you talk about it. And you say, after 10 years of hustling as an opera singer in New York, my manager called me and said, Shirin, are you sitting down? The Metropolitan Opera wants you to sing in Carmen next season. And you say, I had always wanted to be an opera singer ever since I can remember. I would tell people that I was going to sing at the Met. I had imagined this moment in my mind so many times. I always thought it would be filled with so much joy and happiness. I thought it would finally prove to me that I was good enough and worthy. But as I stood there, phone in hand, I realized that I felt none of those things. Instead, I thought, I am not enough, and this is not enough. Girl, tell me about this moment. Tell me about this realization. What happened?
Yeah, I mean, it's that moment where your ultimate dream comes true, whether that is a career or a relationship, whatever that is. And that like realization of, oh, like crap, I got that exact thing I wanted. And the way that I thought I was going to feel isn't there. And, you know, what I've come to understand and what I come to know now, and I think people need to be really mindful of is whenever we're creating a goal, we're really chasing a feeling, right? So we think that our happiness, our joy, our fulfillment, our success is going to be on the other side of that external achievement. And it's not. Like we all know that we've had that experience of getting the exact thing we wanted and maybe having like a brief moment of happiness or joy, but then it wears off and we're on to the next thing. And for me, the Met was like the pinnacle, right? The pinnacle. Like I said in that story, I really would tell everyone when I was little, I would say, I'm going to be an opera singer. Like I couldn't even pronounce opera. I'm going to be an opera singer and I'm going to move to New York and I'm going to sing at the Met. And I had done so much of it. So I didn't sing at the Met until into my 30s. And as a opera singer, that's not considered late, but it's also not considered like early either. Right. So I'd moved to New York. I'd done so many of the things, but that was like the one thing. And I kept saying, okay, well, when you get that job at the Met, you'll feel the way, you'll know you're worthy. You'll know you're good enough. You all of that stuff. And I got it. And I didn't feel that way. And I still had that sense of imposter syndrome. I still had that sense of I'm not good enough. And that really kind of changed the trajectory of my life. Of course, I said yes to the opportunity and that was amazing, but I had a year and a half to prepare to go start my first rehearsal. It's usually pretty typical in the opera world. You get some time to get ready. And in that year and a half, most singers would throw themselves into their vocal technique. But for me, I was like, yes, I'll work on that. But also I need to work on like what's happening on the inside, like emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And I started getting into mindfulness and mindset work. And I started working with a coach. And that shifted my entire life. And to this day, I say that my greatest success in life wasn't singing at the Met, but it was singing at the Met and enjoying every part of that process, which included the moments where things didn't go quote unquote right, where things were difficult and challenging, but I had built such a wonderful set of self-care tools, of mindset techniques, of mindfulness practices, that those things, which in the past, had I flubbed something or done something, it would have been the only thing I would have remembered about a performance. Like that one moment in time, that 10 seconds would wash away, 3 hours on stage and, a month and a half of rehearsal. And that no longer was my story, but I was that person, that perfectionist, that overachiever that would fixate on everything that wasn't going well and I wasn't doing well, as opposed to the things that were going well. And I always felt like in the past, I'd be like, that's being a Pollyanna. That's like, you're not going to be driven. Like, you're not going to want to be better. And I didn't really realize that actually you can become different. You can achieve more in a really kind way as well. And so undoing that was like a process. Yes.
You can become different. You can achieve more.
Yes.
And still feel good.
Yes.
And still be happy. I need all of you to hear that because I believe that there's something there that makes us feel like we have to choose. We have to choose or, just work hard, grind. It's a part of the grind. You're going to be let down, do better next time. Up by the bootstraps, that whole situation. And everything's not fun. Everything's not happy. And here you are getting the goal. Mm-hmm. You became an Oprah singer at the Met. And you were like, let me get my mind right because I know what this means to me. And it's not going to be what I want it to be if I don't take care of myself. That's massive.
Yes.
That's massive.
Yes.
So you perform at the Met and you get to enjoy it, you get to experience it, but something happens where you're like, I don't know if this is what I want to continue doing.
Yes. So I had like, part of my story as well as when I got that call at the Met, it had been a couple years where I was just really, I didn't know it was burnout, but it was burnout now looking back on it. I was really exhausted. I was really miserable again, because I was working from this perspective of I have to be unkind to myself. I have to fixate on what I'm not doing well. I have to fixate on the criticism. And so of course, this creative process, this thing that once used to bring me so much joy, now became like the thorn in my side. It was very difficult. And if there's lots of, creatives listening to this, it's hard when your joy, your creativity becomes your source of income because it takes on a different role in your life. Rhonda's doing praise hands as I'm saying this.
I just leaned back. Keep going, Shirin.
Right. And so, and not even just the creative, if someone's listening, right, who is wanting to start their own business, who's really passionate about what they're doing, if we're not mindful of how we're doing the thing, no matter how much success we make, it can become a weight, right? It can become difficult, right? So it's a lot of the times I think people are like, oh, I need to change my job if I was an entrepreneur. I'm like, no. But you are still the same person doing that thing. And so if you're not shifting how you're doing things, you're going to start your own business. It's going to feel great for a little bit, but then you're going to become your own worst enemy in that business because of how you execute, right? So all that to say, I knew for me that I wasn't really happy with singing, but I had the wisdom to say to myself, maybe you're going to change, maybe you're not going to change careers, but you're only going to make that decision when you find your love of singing again. When you find your joy again, because like I had just seen so many of my colleagues get so exhausted and get so just in a bad place, right? Because it's a very hard career, entrepreneurialism, creatives, whatever, creatives, this. And they stopped doing it, but there was just so much bitterness and anger and resentment. Like, it's like they went to a new job, but they were still carrying that residue with them. And so I was like, I want to get back to a place where I can find my love, and then I'll make the decision from that place. And I often say that to people who work with me, new clients, is like, I want you to get to a place where you have a healthy mindset around this. Right? Yes. And yes, your job sounds terrible, but like, let's get you to a healthy mindset. So then the next decision you make is not from a place of anger or fear or bitterness, because none of those ever make positive results in our lives. Right? So that's kind of what happened with me. So I got the call at the Met, started working with the coach. And I realized during that time, I started finding my love for singing, but I was like, I could see things so much more clearly. I could see where things were challenging, why they were challenging. And I decided that I was like, I actually really love coaching, just the process of it. And so it's actually really interesting, but I enrolled in my coaching certification a couple months before I started rehearsals at the Met. So the two things were kind of happening at the same time. And it was now looking back on it, such a beautiful kind of way that the story unfolded. Once I got my certification, I was kind of doing 80% singing, 20% coaching. And then it's shifted to now it's like 90% coaching, 10% singing. But what's really great about the singing is I choose those jobs so deliberately. It's things I really want to do. It's things that fill my cup. So yeah, that's kind of how I came here to where I am.
Shirin, so many things you said, I personally resonated with. I know a lot of my colleagues, some of my clients. I don't know if we talked about this before, but I was a working actor for many, many years. And I am still an actor. You're always an artist, right? But I haven't gone on a professional audition in about 5 years. So I don't have an agent. I don't do that. I had my own show, which created joy. But I was that person and am that person, let's be honest, where everything that I seem to find excitement and creativity, it becomes the job, right? And when it became the job, it became really difficult. And so I love the craft of acting, but the industry, man, for a very highly sensitive, deep empath for me, and that constant rejection. And I feel like it is present in a lot of fields, but for us performing arts professionals, people who do not do it, do not get the level of rejection and putting yourself out there, and how that like jacks up your mind sometimes. It really can if you don't do the work that you did. And so I have been through that. And I remember getting those opportunities where like, wow, I'm working at Steppenwolf Theater. And I remember a very specific situation where I was like, it did not feel the way I thought it would feel. And I was like, whoa. So it's very, very true that we can take those patterns with us throughout every new incarnation of how we do our work. And so what I'm hearing is what you do with your clients is like, okay, girl, let's fix this. Let's get into this. Let's explore this. Let's dismantle these ideas and find a way that you find your worthiness regardless of this, right? So how much is worthiness a part of this work? Because this is something I find a lot with my clients and myself. So where does this come in with you?
I mean, it's everything. So I think a lot of the time we're hustling for our worth.
Ooh.
Right? We think we're hustling for money or for clients or whatever that is, but we're really hustling for our worth. I wonder if there's an overlap with you and the work that you do, but clients come to me because they're like, listen, I want to quit my job. I want to like have deadlines. I want to have goals. I want to have accountability. And I'm like, cool. Yeah, we're going to have that. And then they're like in tears in most sessions because we're going, not that I want people to cry, obviously. However, what we're actually having to deal with is the part of you, the trauma, the fear, whatever you grew up with, all that stuff that makes you feel like unless you're doing things, unless you're doing them perfectly, or unless you're people pleasing, or unless, you are the best in the room, you are not worthy and you're not valuable. And if we are always hustling for our worth, we're never making decisions that are for our highest good, that are healthy, that are really rooted and centered in who we are, And so that worthy piece is, I say to my clients, you are worthy because you are, right? And that's a hard thing. Yes, there's a part of you that's like, yes, I am. I'm worthy because I am. But there's a part of you that's like, no, but I have to make like this much money and then I'm worthy, or I have to find this partner and then I'm worthy, right? And so really working on that worth piece, and a really great question is to really ask yourself, like, when I am hustling for my worth, when I feel that, like, first of all, what does that feel like in my body? Because sometimes we don't know we're doing it. What are the thoughts I think? And then, what's the result of that, right? Like, because I work a lot with women of color. I'm a first generation Muslim Iranian, and I grew up, and this is kind of the shared experience of many of the women of color I have the privilege of working with, of always having to be 110%, right? Of not feeling like I am equally worthy or equally valuable. And I had to prove my worth in the things that I did and the way that I did them. Whether that's your body or how funny you are, or how good you do the work you do, right? And it gets us really far. And I think that's the insidious thing, is that when we hustle for our worth, we develop a lot of skill sets that in our society are actually applauded, right? Overworking, overachieving, people pleasing, perfectionism. These things are applauded, but they're ultimately really unhealthy and damaging towards ourselves and our lives. And so kind of undoing that, letting go of that, is the work that we, like, you first have to kind of go through. Yeah.
Welcome to your free coaching session, everyone. Shirin is getting all of us completely together. I'm so glad you brought that up, because my question was going to be, how do we get to worthy? And what I'm hearing from you is that it's complex. We have to undo a lot, especially for us women of color who have added expectations where perfectionism is applauded. And I think that's a lot. We talk a lot about perfectionism. It's like, it's not good to be a perfectionist, but how many people got applauded for, like, oh, you did everything right, just the way we expected you to do. Like, those messages were given to us growing up a lot more than other folks. And so, of course, we think that that's the goal, even if we intellectually don't believe that. It's embedded. So you got to do a lot of undoing and unraveling. So how do we unravel that, girl? Get me together.
Well, it is a lot of that, right? It's kind of looking at how you grew up, what the conversations in your household were like. Not because we're never talking about worth, right? But it would be around, like, for instance, in my house, whenever I got an A+, like, my family was definitely more happy than when I got a C-. So it's kind of looking at what those cues were when you were younger, and then seeing in your life and listen, this is a practice. I preach and teach and practice it, but, like, I find myself obviously in this mode too. But anytime I'm searching outside myself for, like, wholeness or wholeness or worthiness is a tough one, right? But, like, wholeness, or my business is going to be fulfilling or successful when this happens, when I'm trying to find, like, if I'm waiting for a client to give me some sort of validation, or a client to sign on with me, or I get to a certain income level, I know I'm hustling for my worth, because, like, we really inherently are worthy because we just exist and we just are. Just you being in this world, being your beautiful self. You do not even need to do anything on top of that. All the other stuff is the cherry on top. So you really have to look at, so what was the conversations like in my family, in my school, and then looking at, like, the capitalistic and white supremacist society that we live in, right? What are the things that we're taught there? I really have been digging on social media. I follow the NAP ministry. Do you follow them? Right. Which is all about, like, rest and ease. Like, things that my immigrant ass was not comfortable with, because that is not what I saw my family doing, right? Like, rest and ease, right? Like, our worthiness is not in what we do. And that's like, it's really undoing a lot of those beliefs because we all think we're operating because of what we want to achieve, our objectives, but we're always operating from what we believe. And so it's getting to that deep level of what am I believing about myself, about my business, about whatever life.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I also have learned with myself and what I remind my clients, what I love that you said is a practice, because even when you've done the work, it will still continue to show up as you grow and as you evolve and as you get to whatever next level, it will show up again. You'll have to, I guess, reinforce your practice or keep working on it because you'll have new challenges, but it'll be the same stuff. And I think people need to really acknowledge that it is a journey to worthiness and not just, okay, I'm worthy now. Cool.
Yeah, no.
Yes. So I want to talk about intuition because I will tell you, I know it's a big part of the work, right? Being able to listen to yourselves. There's so many messages that we are told how to feel, what to, especially in terms of worthiness. And I know recently in my life, I've had multiple situations where I feel like I wasn't listening to my intuition, or if I heard it, I didn't trust it. And all times, more than two, they backfired. And I was asking myself, I often ask myself, like, what is the lesson in this? What is that lesson? And usually it's like, I really got to listen to that voice and trust it. I really got to do that. How can we pay more attention or be able to even listen and hear our intuition more?
Girl, I mean, that's a 6-month program that I offer.
Come on.
But no, I'll tell you. So for me, so I have a group program called Wholehearted Woman. The very first month, the first 2 topics, it's intuition and self-trust, because those 2 things are so connected. Because what I've come to understand through my work in my own life and working with clients is that we all know best. As a coach, I'm not showing you something you don't know. It's something you do know, but you have all these layers of fear or doubt or beliefs that are kind of holding you from doing that thing you know best, because our intuition often asks us to do things that don't make sense, things that are scary, things that may really change and disrupt our lives. And we've also been conditioned as well to really trust like facts and logic and reason in our society, right? Capitalism, white supremacy, facts, logic, reason, masculine energy. Whereas intuition's just like, I got a feeling, like I sense this. I have like something in my gut. Like I had a dream, right? Some people have that. And we sound like we're quacks. Like I have a feeling that this is right. But that's the unfortunate thing of living in the society, because in some cultures, having a feeling is just as equally as valid as, this statistic or data. But in our society, it's not. It's not. And so we have all been there, exactly as you said. We have all experienced that moment where we say, I knew better. And I knew better implies that you can be in touch with your intuition. I knew better implies that you did know what was best for you, but it also implies that you didn't listen to that. So like for me, my mission in my work is that we do not ever have to say, I knew better again, because once we know better, we do better. We do the thing that's for us. And I think the struggle with intuition is that we're so fixated with making the right decision, and choosing intuition and making the right decision are kind of not the same thing. I always say choosing your intuition is you making the choice that's most right for you in that moment. Our intuition takes us down the pathways we're supposed to go down. And Rachel Cargill and Elizabeth Gilbert did this talk. I'm actually loving how everything is on Zoom now, because we have access to conversations that we never would have in the past. But they had this talk and Rachel said, making decisions isn't as risky when I know that all I'm doing is betting on myself. Regardless of whatever happens on the other side, I trust that if it doesn't work out, I know how to get my footing again. And if it does work out, I'm gonna run with it. And that's kind of that intuition asks you to get curious about this thing. And then self-trust is like, okay, this is what my gut is telling me to do. And I trust I can figure it out. But I'm saying this and making it sound like it's super easy to tap into our intuition, especially when we haven't been in touch with it for a while. So it's very much like a muscle. It's there. For a lot of us, it's atrophied. For a lot of us, there's certain areas in our life where intuition is easy. Like I always use the example of like, I'm intuitive in my kitchen. I can like, whatever, I can figure it out, right? But with my business, sometimes I can't be as intuitive because I have a lot more fears. I don't have as much experience. And so it's really just leaning into where the intuition is there, seeing what works there, applying it to the other places, and really taking a risk on yourself. It's a slow process, though. It really is a slow process. But we all have intuition and we all have a connection to our intuition. That's 100%.
Taking it all in, girl. So aligned a bit with this, I have gotten lots of requests to talk about boundaries. And I feel like boundaries not being honored, not setting boundaries can also be aligned with intuition, because we know there's a boundary to be set. We may not know how to go about it, but we know when things may or may not feel right or may not be the best decision at the time. But yet and still, we don't set boundaries, we violate them, and we may violate other people's. So boundaries 101, right? How important are boundaries, and how can we do a better job of honoring and setting them?
Okay, so boundaries are, for me, self-care. Like, we keep talking about self-care. Boundaries to me are like one of the ultimate forms of self-care. And honestly, I feel like without boundaries, self-care just doesn't really happen, right? Because boundaries are us really preserving and prioritizing our time and energy, right? And using it towards the things that are most important, whether that's ourselves or other people in our community. I think boundaries are really incredibly difficult because, especially if you identify as a woman, if you were raised as a female in the society, we have been taught to be selfless, right? Like, our base point, our foundation of being a good person is actually being a selfless person, right? That's what we saw our parents, if we grew up with them in our household, our movies, in society. Women are supposed to be selfless, and that makes you good. And you taking time for yourself, that makes you selfish, right? And that word selfishness is one that has been weaponized, just weaponized against women. I have heard it in my lifetime. I'm sure you have, Rhonda, other people in our community, right? Those of you, if you're going for your dreams and trying to really prioritize what's most important to you, I'm sure you have been called selfish at some point. And it is a heavy word. It is a word that makes us feel ways. And so for me, it's really, it's like getting clear. Me creating this boundary makes me, and just fill that in, like, makes me a bad person, makes me selfish, makes me this, that, and the other. And so that's what you're working against, right? So no wonder you can't create boundaries. So having that compassion for yourself, that like, you got years of conditioning that are kind of keeping you from this, right? But the other thing I want to say about boundaries is that we want to make boundaries and be liked and understood. Like, I'm making this boundary, but I still want you to like me. I want you to understand why I'm making this boundary.
Girl.
Right? You can't, we can't, you cannot, if you're trying to do that, then you're going to compromise or you're not going to make the boundary. But making a boundary means having difficult discussions. It means feelings the other person's going to feel and feelings you're going to feel too. We want to make a boundary and for the other person to be like, yeah, that sounds great. Just go ahead and do that. And that's not the case, unfortunately, a lot of the time. Right. And so really releasing the fact of like, I think that's the reason a lot of the times we're like so scared of the response from the other person. And so I always say we'd rather let ourselves down than let someone else down, right? We'd rather be uncomfortable than letting someone else be uncomfortable. And that's an equation we need to change and we need to rethink, right? Yes. I mean, I could go on about boundaries, girl, but I think those are
like, go off, especially that last piece about we'd rather let ourselves down than other people down. When you were saying that, I'm like, right. So we'd rather harm ourselves than other people. What is like, what does that really, I'm trying to really wrap my mind around that for myself, selfishly, and also just for other people, because that's what we've been taught is that, give and you suffer, you absorb it. And I do believe that that has a long-term effect. It absolutely has a long-term effect. How do we wrestle with that feeling for recovering people pleasers like myself and for other people who may or may not identify that feeling of, yes, I know boundaries are important. Yes, I'm going to set it, but also it doesn't really feel great when I do it.
So one, again, it's a practice. And so the more you do it, the more sometimes you'll see, oh, wow, that didn't go as poorly as I thought. And other times, if it does kind of go, it's difficult. It's about creating kind of an arsenal of like self-care tools, of things for yourself that are going to help you get through. Like sometimes if I know I'm going to have a difficult boundary conversation, as like a performer, I visualize it in my head. I visualize the conversation. I also visualize like, oh, I know at this point, I'll probably feel really guilty and I'll feel like really ashamed. And what am I going to say to myself in that moment? It's not so much what am I going to say to the other person. It's how am I going to respond for myself in that moment? But really it's getting down to like sitting with that thought of, okay, I can either choose to harm myself or it's not harm, but it's like, I can either choose to be the one who's let down. Right? If I keep letting myself down, what's going to happen? You know, I always say the person we betray the most is ourselves. When we talk about boundaries, we really have to talk about ourselves because no one has to honor our boundaries except ourselves. Right? That's like the tough thing I don't think we get is it's no one's responsibility to honor your boundary except yourself. Your husband keeps doing that thing. Your wife keeps doing that thing. Your child keeps doing that thing. Your colleague keeps doing. That's not on them. We can keep reiterating. We can keep whatever. We need to change things, but you have to honor and keep up that boundary. And I think that's something that we expect others to be like, yeah, that sounds great. But expectations always lead to kind of being let down or resentment. And I always say resentment is a sign that a boundary is being crossed. And whenever I'm feeling that, I'm like, okay, what's happening here? Where am I compromising on what I need? Where am I giving away what I may need? A really great script, and I don't know if this will help for the listeners, that I like to use. It's based off of Alison Armstrong, who is kind of a dating and relationship coach. Now, some of the stuff she says is kind of anti-feminist, so I wouldn't take everything she says as 100%. But this I love. And so a lot of her stuff is about female-male communication. But this script that she has is like, I use it with everyone. And it's like my magic elixir, whatever. So it's called I think it's a great ask or something, it's a great ask. So it has 4 components because she says that the people who love us, the people who are in our lives really do want to provide for us, but they often don't know how. And so in the great ask, you figure out exactly what you need from that other person. So let's say in this case, you know, a conversation that sometimes happens in relationships is like, I feel like we're not connecting enough. We're not connected enough. Well, you say I'm not connected enough. The other person's version of connected and your connected are very different. So it's you getting clear on what is connected for me. Okay. Connected is having a text in the morning or evening, or checking in at dinner, or sitting down to dinner, whatever that is, right? Figuring out what connected is for you. Telling the person what that's going to provide you with, right? So it's going to make me feel so much more grounded and connected to you and just all loved up if we could have dinner 3 times this week, just together. We try to do that every month. And then say, is there anything that I can do to help with that? And is that 3 parts? There's a 4th part I'm missing. But so figuring out what the thing is that you need, telling the person what it's going to provide, and then asking, hey, is there anything I can do to help that happen? That for me has like worked with my mom, with my sister, with my husband, with like colleagues, because once they hear it in that way, and then if they're like, actually, no, I can't do 3 days a week. Could we do once a week? Could we do this? And then it becomes a conversation that's much more like grounded and connected. And like, actually you're talking about the thing that really matters. Does that make sense? I love that script so much.
That's a great script. I'm going to take that. So Shirin, I can talk to you all day, and I really do. And we're going to talk after we stop recording because that's how it goes. But people are going to listen to this and be thinking about all the goals they want to smash and all the things they want to do. How can they incorporate your work, mindfulness, having your mindset together as along with all of the specific markers that they want to meet, because in my opinion, that is as important, if not more, than whatever you want to achieve.
Yeah. So I think if 2020 taught us anything, is that nothing is certain, change is going to happen. And I think 2020 has left all of us reeling, especially goal setters, go-getters. This year burned us all, right? Those dreams that we had, those plans we set did not happen. So I think either we're like really gearing up for 2021, like this is going to be, I'm going to do all the things, or we're feeling like, oh my gosh, like I'm still recovering. Like I don't even know what to do. And so for me, I think the key, and this is how I intentionally set every year, is I figure out what are the 5 feelings that I really want to feel this year. Or some people say they're 5 words or 5 values. I say feelings because again, when we're chasing a goal, we're just chasing a feeling. And when you get clear on what those feelings or words are for you, then look at what things you can be doing in your life to cultivate and create those feelings. So we're no longer delaying feeling the way we want to feel until we get where we are supposed to be, right? So for instance, this year, a lot of the things I wanted to happen didn't happen. But because I had my 5 feelings, I could pivot and be like, all right, well, what in this circumstance, what helps me feel bold? That was one of my words for last year. In this circumstance, what helps me feel free? And that was really like a compass, a guiding light for me, because the external crumbled before my eyes. You know, my husband and I were supposed to get married. I was supposed to have my first in-person retreat, all these things. And I'm sure there's lots of listeners listening that like really intense, incredibly hard things happened. But having those feelings as a guideline allows you to, you know, create those big goals, but you have the why underneath. And if you need to pivot and shift, you can and be like, okay, well, if this isn't how freedom's supposed to happen, how is freedom going to happen now in this circumstance? And so I really, really encourage all of us to do that and making that down from the micro to the macro, right? From like how you wake up in the morning to, you know, what you're doing when you're on your computer. So that for me is like the guiding light. If you take anything away from this, is get clear on how you want to feel in 2021. And then create the goals or the, you know, accomplishments, achievements, intentions.
Thank you. That's it.
You're welcome.
That is amazing. And I will do that. And I hope all of you do that too. Shirin, this has been a pleasure. Tell us how we can stay in touch with you and how we can work with you.
Yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram. It's at Wholehearted Coaching. My website's wholehearted-coaching.com. And I also have a podcast. It's just me. I don't bring in guests. I feel like I should though, but it's just me talking. But it's Wholehearted Coaching, the podcast.
Thank you so much for joining Oversharing with Rhonda.
Thank you for having me.
Woo. This is one I'm going to play over and over whenever I need a reset. Favorite quotes. Whenever we are chasing a goal, we are chasing a feeling. You can behave different. You can achieve more in a really kind way. This was my favorite. If we are always hustling for our worth, we are not making the best decisions. We are inherently worthy because we are. And finally, no need to fixate on the right decision. Bet on yourself. Take that into your week, into your month, and into your 2021. If you liked what you heard, please rate and review us on iTunes. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.